Going to take you down to Belize as we are chatting with Dennis DM Meador. He is the founder and CEO of the Legal Podcast Network. You can find more about them at thelegalpodcastnetwork.com. DM, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Don't worry. It's taken some of my family years to get it. So only took you one try. So I appreciate it.
I will do my best to stay consistent. No guarantees though. So you have the Podcast Legal Network. I'm curious, how did you get to this spot of wanting to help lawyers and, publish podcasts on behalf of lawyers into this network format?
So I have a background in marketing. I've done it about 30 years, basically my whole career. I went to college for theology and ended up on like a sales floor, phone sales, ended up in advertising, phone sales, loved it, then got into entrepreneurship. I'd been an entrepreneur as a teenager, a couple different things that I did that's how I never had like a job. I'd worked at Burger King a little while, but I always made money though. So, as I got into marketing, then through the years, I learned probably about 8 years into my career, I guess, I learned how much I enjoyed working with lawyers. And so, although I'd done marketing and had come up with some concepts, I learned pretty quickly, like I like white collar. I like the realtors, the mortgage brokers, the insurance agents. And then everyone's like, well, lawyers are tough. And then, I'm the kind of person, I'm like, you tell me it's tough. They're like, they're tough, but they got money. And I'm like, well, I'll try them. And so I started selling them and I excelled with it. And what I like about attorneys, and I say this 100 times, I say this every time I talk about, because everyone's like, why attorneys? They are typically taught to work off of logic versus emotion. And so when you are discussing selling to them, however you want to say it, if you don't want to use sales tactics. You don't want to come at them with, if you buy, if I could bring you 5 clients a month, how would that change your life? And those sort of sales tactics that are out there.
Sell me this pen, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, should I send this to your house or your yacht? That sort of thing. So, although with attorneys, anyway. So so I got into selling them, and what I liked about it was I could have a discussion without it turning into an argument. So I could say, well, I hear what you're saying, but what about this? And like blue collar guys would be just like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking. You don't tell me how to run my business, Whereas with an attorney, if you presented them with a piece of logic, they would go, huh. And then like you could, kind of make it make sense. And then if you did, then more often than not, I found that they would say, all right, I'll give it a try. They tend to have more finances. So I like that about them. So I've worked with attorneys for over 20 years. I've done social with them. I've done, you run the gamut of what's happened in digital, obviously SEO, PPC, all of that kind of stuff. Kind of like a Legal Match sort of program. It was a small competitor to Legal Match. That's actually how I got into selling them, is a small competitor with Legal Match back in the day. And it was like, I went from selling $50 donations to $300 to $500 ads to $5,000, a month packages to lawyers. And I was just like, why would I go back to selling $500 packages when I can sell $5,000 packages? And, and so that's how I've worked with them for years. And then my last company, my partner bought me out. It was time to renew our agreement because he had an existing company. He had about 70, not quite 80 clients, 78 or something like that, doing a little under $1 million a year. I came in and we put together an agreement. It was a 5-year agreement. And in 5 years, I grew his company, where he had been around 9 years at the time. I grew his company from 78 clients to almost 500, from less than $1 million to over $5 million a year. And he had people in his ear basically saying, why are you paying this guy all this money? All he does is just run a team. You could just replace him. And so he bought me out for pennies on the dollar because we were running under the contract that we had put together years ago, which is fine. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a book of ideas. I always tell people, if you're an entrepreneur, take everything away from an entrepreneur, give them a laptop and an internet connection, and in 3 days they'll have a new business, and in 30 days they'll be in the same place they were. So that's kind of what happened. I just was like, I know I'm on work with attorneys. I understand them. I've been working with them for years, and I love podcasting. I had a podcast that I did back in Austin, and we can go into that in a little bit, but that's kind of how I got into it with attorneys. And really, for me, podcasting for attorneys isn't about building an audience. It is about reaching their ideal client at the right time. And so for them, we do almost all FAQ 20-minute podcasts. We provide the hosts. We come up with the questions, and then the attorney just answers the questions. And then we use that to scale Google, use YouTube, all of that. So when somebody types in what happens to a second home during a divorce, my attorney is the one answering it with a YouTube video or an FAQ page on his website. So we go after question-based search. Some people call it it used to be called long tail. Then it was called question-based search. I guess now they're rebranding it as answer engine optimization, which is just the same thing. It's just basically answering questions instead of showing up for just like divorce lawyer Houston.
Well, and it's all, how do I hack search, right? How do I get in front of eyeballs when people are trying to find me or find what I offer? So not only do you help lawyers produce podcasts and put out content, but you have this network. And so I guess that means you've pooled all these lawyer shows. Like, are they all from one firm? Are they all in similar industries? Or is it really just any lawyer with a show is on the network, and we, a rising tide lifts all ships kind of a thing?
It's kind of that way, I would say. The other thing that we're able to do is build relationships between people. For example, we have kind of our first collaborative series of two of our clients that is in production right now. One is a IP patent trademark firm. And then the other guy, because we don't just work with lawyers, we work with companies who work with lawyers, because we have a database of 200,000 attorneys that we market to. We have an opt-in daily email for law practice, marketing, and management with about 35 to 40,000 attorneys in it. That it's about a 3 to 5 minute read. So we can take, like the two that I'm talking about, he has an AI system that he's built for law firms to help them run more efficiently, to identify their weaknesses. And so he has a show on our network. And so now he's got this like really cool AI thing. And now he's working with our IP patent trademark client. And the two of them together are doing a series of shows. And so that's the kind of thing that we're able to do. And then we're building this database of, like, when you land on our homepage, and we're building this out right now. We have our YouTube page, and that's got hundreds of videos and thousands of shorts. But on our homepage, it's podcasts for lawyers and podcasts for clients. And you can actually click and see all the shows for lawyers, but you can also click and be like, okay, I'm in California and I need a divorce lawyer, and it'll show you all of the divorce lawyers and their podcasts in California. And then, you could look and be like, oh, okay, because we do them by counties or jurisdictions. So we'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'm in Riverside County. This is the attorney for Riverside County. They click on it, they go, and they see all the shows, the podcasts that attorney has done. So that's how we're kind of building and kind of spidering everything together through our website, through YouTube, through Google, and kind of using, like you said, the rising tide lifts all ships.
That's interesting. That's a interesting feature, that ability to search for the right attorney for the right thing in the right area, and then see all the different places where they've appeared on, various pieces of content. I imagine that technology to do that is somewhat proprietary, but I bet you there would be lots of people who would be interested in replicating that for their networks. I'm curious, with you being multifaceted, right? Like you said, YouTube and podcasts and search and Google and all this other stuff. there's been this huge debate about the YouTube versus the audio only podcasting world. As a network, which do you find is better for your shows and for growth? YouTube or like podcast network features? And what are the YouTube features maybe that really help networks?
So I would say certainly YouTube. Um, and it's very simple. I think, you and I were kind of talking about this. Everyone says the green room, but it's just before we hit record, right? But we were talking about this in the green room. And, with YouTube, first of all, it's owned by Google. So by producing that content, we're feeding the beast, but we're also creating very specialized content that what does Google want? It wants local, relevant content that people are going to consume. Well, what is the most consumed content out there? Video. So what we do is we create a YouTube channel for each of our clients, but then we also have our YouTube channel that has all of our clients. And so for our client in studio, we're going in and we're going Riverside County divorce, divorce lawyer, high asset divorce, high net worth divorce, blah, blah, blah in studio. And so when somebody in Riverside County is doing a search, Google prefers to give people video. So if somebody asks a specific question, and that's the beauty about YouTube, you upload that video, it breaks it down for you, and it has all the little question sections. So it literally will just go boom right to that question. So I like to use the example: if I'm a divorce attorney, would I rather show up for divorce lawyer in Riverside County, where it's just going to list like 20 attorneys, and people are going to call down the list and most likely be like, well, how much does it cost? Because when something's a commodity, and that's what Google has done, is it's commoditized the legal industry. Just in my 20 years of working with the industry, I've seen attorneys who literally and I do this now on purpose just to show them how they no longer can depend on things like directories and generic Google and PPC, is I'll say to them, I'll be like, oh, so you're a divorce lawyer in, let's say, LA County, specializing in like the Beverly Hills area, right? And I'll be able to say something like, so you're what, like 700 an hour, 750 an hour? And they'll say, I wish. About 10 years ago I was, but with how competitive things are, we're now down to about 500 an hour. And obviously that could be, 400, and now they're at 325 or whatever the number is. And so because there's so much commoditization in this knowledge industry, what we do is we try to rise that back up to thought leadership, authoritative positioning, so that they can get people that fit their ideal client profile, so that they can charge what they should be charging for who they are, the experience they have, and the talent that they have. But when an attorney is judged solely on the price, how do you raise your prices? You can't. You can only lower. Just like the high tide raises, guess what happens when 30% of the people I call are going to tell me that their rate is $225 an hour. Then I call somebody who's $450 an hour. I'm going to be like, holy cow, he's twice as much, because I'm not seeing I'm not seeing the value there. So when we use question-based search at its core, so we create FAQ pages for their website from the transcripts. We actually download the transcript and then we edit it into FAQ format. We put the videos on their website. We create the YouTube channels. And so the advantage with YouTube is, now when I do a specific search, which is a more educated person with a specialized issue, like what happens to a second home during a divorce? Well, now the first one could be somebody who's trying to get a $500 mutual, let's just get rid, we have no assets, let's just get out of each other's lives, quickie divorce. The second one is probably somebody with some assets. There's probably going to be some fighting, custody issues. So the attorney can target that second client who has the second home, versus just generically casting a net. He's now able to take that specialty lure that goes after that one kind of fish and put it out into the water to capture that fish. And that's what we're providing through YouTube.
So are the podcasts really just a separate distribution channel for video content, or are you actually producing audio only content as well?
We do everything streaming just like this, right? So you and I, and so all of we do everything streaming. We produce a YouTube show, we create shorts or reels or shorts, we create audiograms, but we also upload and create their own channels through Podbean on like 22 different networks, everything from Apple, Spotify, Audible, which is Amazon's, Odyssey, all of those channels that are on Podbean. So for the people that want to consume the content as a podcast, it's there. So if I'm a podcaster, and that's how I get my information, and most people who learn through podcasting, they learn everything. That's their digital language. I have met more people, especially on this island, where there's like, oh, I just listen to podcasts. Because I'm like, oh, what shows do you watch? Like, I just listen to podcasts. So if I can help somebody who's like, in LA, look, LA divorce attorney, now my client's show pops up. And so then they can look at the episodes, or again, those same results in Google. So I will say that our audio is probably more of a cachet means to an end, but that doesn't mean it doesn't provide value, and it's evergreen, and it's a growing medium. So it's like, we know that our clients are coming to us because they're being told they need a podcast. But what we're really giving them is a holistic marketing solution that allows them to go after their ideal clients.
The other thing I really appreciate about what you're doing with YouTube, and something that I've always been very passionate and curious about, is that local targeting, right? That's just not really a function or something that you can do effectively with podcasting right now. And so, this huge debate about, is YouTube podcast or podcast YouTube? Who cares? But the fact that YouTube makes it easy to really hyper target your content to the right audience, I think it's something that more network providers and just more show creators should be thinking about in the long run.
Well, and I think podcasts are going to be like how the internet was. I remember back like in the early aughts, I like to say that. My wife says I sound old when I say that, but in the early 2000s, right? I remember I used to tell people, the smaller the internet gets, the bigger it will be. And the smaller podcasting gets, the bigger it will be. Because we have to understand that people go to these different outlets, some just for general education and whatever, but really when they're searching and they need their fears assuaged, they need clarity on an issue, they want to know that what they're reading, because there's such a plethora of material out there and content out there, content curation is a bigger skill than content creation, really, if you think about it. So the more that we're able to provide content on a local level, that benefits our clients. I tell them, I'm like, listen, would you rather have a show that got 50,000 downloads and views, but they're all in, Thailand and Mississippi and Canada and California, and you're in Michigan? Or would you rather have a show that gets 50 views, but you get 10 people that call you and 6 of them hire you because they see you as an expert? Which one provides you more value? And unless they're just one of those jerk of a person that's like, I'll take the 50. No, you won't. No, I'll take the 50,000. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you won't. You'll take the 6 clients who give you a $10,000 retainer and pay you $350 an hour, and you end up making $15,000 to $20,000 off of them. The return on investment is infinitely higher. And that's the other thing. Like, attorneys will say, well, how are you going to help me go viral? And I'm like, I don't want you to go viral. And they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, listen, if you want to learn how to unicycle while juggling law books and then right off the end of a pier, and we'll video it and we'll get millions of views and you'll get laughs and then you'll get a $2,000 check from YouTube for the views. Or how about we just reflect who you are offline, online, your knowledge, the fact that you've been doing these all these years. You specialize in working with high net worth individuals. And so when they hire you, they're going to give you 20 grand. And so you're going to make 120,000, but you have a fraction of the actual views or, people consuming your content. And when that mind shift hits, they're like, oh, and this again, why I like attorneys. Oh, you're right. Okay. So that's our focus.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot more podcasters and honestly just content creators in general should be focusing on is 100,000 views, listens, whatever of not your target market is nowhere near as effective as 100 of the people who are going to sign up for your services, buy your product, follow your show, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's some really good advice and something anybody who's thinking about network or again, just somebody who's looking at their content creation and feels like they're spinning their wheels should absolutely take to heart. As a reminder, we are chatting with Dennis DM Meador. He is founder and CEO of the Legal Podcast Network. DM, before I let you go, there's a few questions I'd like to ask everybody, and I'm going to be very curious because of your experience and all these other places that you've mastered. I'll be curious to kind of hear what you think of our little cute, quaint podcasting space. Is there something where in podcasting you would like to see improvement, whether it's from the production side, distribution, listening, consumption, discoverability? Like, is there just something in podcasting where you're like, God, I wish we did this better?
I think you nailed it earlier. It's the ability to search within the podcasts. The fact that you have to hear about a podcast, like there's just not a way that they've really mastered making podcasts accessible. It's almost like you got to know someone who knows someone. You know what I mean? And it's like, whereas Google's just like, oh, and even social media, they're always just like, oh, what do you think of this? How about this? And you said you like this. So what about this? Podcasting's like this. Well, is that it? Well, ask me a different way, please. Oh, okay. How about this? That. You know what I mean? It's just very rigid, and it's very almost just like in old school, if that makes sense. Because the rest of the internet is just like, it's just this like infinite like connectivity and touch points. It's like podcast stands alone off to the side, and it's just like, we're smarter. We don't have to be a part of your group. We've got our own thing going on. Like that's the vibe of podcasting to me. And maybe I'm wrong. And those who are listening who love podcasting, I'm not saying I don't love podcasting, but you asked me what I would improve. I would improve the connectivity of podcasting to everything else.
I would agree that we certainly have a discoverability problem. I never thought of it in that connectivity problem, but it's funny you say that. I've been recently trying to find a podcast to listen to. One of them starting to get boring or I have a little bit more time. And trying to search for one to appease my checklist is so difficult. And usually when you search, what you normally get are just, here are the articles that people wrote about podcasting, and they're all promoting the same 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, right? It's all the same ones that are in the top rankings. And it's hard to get outside of that circle. And it really does feel like luck if you meet someone or, someone points you in the direction of a show that you wouldn't have otherwise have found. So that's a really good point. What about on the tech side? I mean, is there anything on your wish list as far as something that either is out there that you want to buy yourself or something that you're like, God, I wish somebody would make this and that would make everyone's lives easier?
I wish that the good products were as easy to use as the bad products, i.e. the Blue Yeti. Now, I don't hate the Blue Yeti. I use the Blue Yeti for a minute, but plug and play, real easy, but it's not a great product. So here I have this Shure microphone, and yeah, it's plug and play, but I had to do a little more to it. I have to make sure it's placed right. And like I work with attorneys, and to help other people podcast is the biggest challenge. When you have somebody on your podcast remote that is not a podcaster, they think they can just show up with their iPhone and just like, and so I wish there was it's almost just like an easy way to make sure that people who are podcasting, and honestly, we're trying to find a way to do this ourselves, where we're just like, if you are going to, this is what you have to buy in order to just even work with us. But it's all plug and play, but it works the way it needs to, the right camera, the right microphone. And even think about this, you and I'm not tech savvy in that, like I've been in IT or anything like that, but I've been using computers since I was in college, and I'm 47. Like I was the only person in my dorm with a computer. And, this was like 95, fall of 1995. So I know and we had to spend 5 minutes to get my easy plug and play with our easy Riverside plug and play to get my microphone working right. Well, if I had a 58-year-old attorney who sometimes has to have his, or 68-year-old attorney who sometimes has to have his administrator come in and turn on his computer for him. If I had him on the other end, he would just forget it. We'll just do this another time. So I really wish that we could just make it as easy as we do the cell phone. Because now even grandma's carrying around a cell phone. But grandma's not podcasting because it's not as easy.
It's true. It is very true. And lastly, are there podcasts on your listening list that you have to consume when they come out, that you will never let an episode get past you?
The Office Ladies, favorite. I don't know if you've talked about it a lot or whatever, but it's Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey. And they have been doing it for a few, I want to say 3, maybe 4 years now, episode by episode. And what's really interesting about the Office Ladies is they deep dive. And the thing about people that listen, do you watch The Office?
I watched a lot of it when it was first started off, and then I trailed off after a few seasons. But I respect the show and the comedy, and they're great.
So it was the most streamed show during the pandemic. So like Gen Z caught on to it, millennials love it. So it kind of re-upped, and because it's kind of tongue in cheek and it's so inappropriate in so many ways, and it's so, like The Office couldn't exist in the way that it did back then now, just because they'd have picketing outside every day. But now people kind of like, they still laugh at it. But so people who watch The Office, the question is not, have you watched The Office? The question is, do you watch The Office? Because people who watch The Office, I've seen it beginning to end on purpose 7 times. I've watched countless one-off episodes. I have 3, 4, 5 of my favorite episodes that I could just like right now walk out of here. I could go watch Dinner Party. That's one of my favorite ones. If I know I want to laugh and have ridiculous, I could, just whatever. Like I could just go and like as soon as an episode goes, I can go in my head. I know everything is going to happen. I laugh before it even happens. And so what the Office Ladies podcast did or does is they deep dive. One time they had like the guy who manned their snack cart, but they've had Steve Carell and all the major people. But like one episode, they're like, he just had the greatest snacks and sandwiches, and he like was sharing like his secret sandwich, sauce recipe, and like just stuff like that where it just brings the episode alive. Or they'll be like, oh, okay. So in this scene right here, what you'll notice is so-and-so turns their head. The reason they turn their head is they broke, and they're actually dying laughing. And if you watch their side, you could see them actually moving up and down laughing. And so I'll rewatch the episodes, and I'll notice all these little things that I would have never known had I not had 2 ladies who were there and producers who were there, whoever's on with them at the time, the writers, the producers, just everybody just coming back and reminiscing, what they got from the show as a Christmas swag gift, and just all this little stuff that opens up the show for me in so many ways where I can experience it again in a new way. And when you love something, that's always wonderful.
Yeah, I love the idea of having the folks who aren't always on podcasts, right? You said Steve Carell. I'm sure he's done a bunch of podcasts and has answered the same questions over and over again. So I love that concept of going to, the behind the scenes players, the folks who nobody would think to interview and bringing them on. And I also appreciate the fact that for The Office, right? This content has now created another reason for you to go back and watch it again. And
Yep.
so something for people to consider in, movie and television and film production. So that's a great point. So once again, it's been Dennis DM Meador, founder and CEO of the Legal Podcast Network. You can find more at thelegalpodcastnetwork.com. DM, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Matthew.